Okay, the rhetorical synthesis questions, or I like to refer them as best accomplishes a goal, because really the prompt defines a goal that the answer choice must achieve or best achieves. These question types have a few repeating prompts. One of them is the student wants to make and support a generalization about blank. Okay, so the first step in these particular prompts is to identify what exactly it is the student wants to make the generalization of. The effect of redesigning a city flag in this case. We're going to keep that goal in mind as we read through the different bullet points. Just like states have state flags, some cities have city flags. Over 100 U.S. cities have redesigned their flags since 2015. This is background material. The first couple prompts always are. The city of Pocatello, Idaho, redesigned its flag after it was named the most poorly designed flag in North America. Here's a specific detail. Hasn't yet discussed the effect of redesigning a city flag. Usually the effect is going to be the last two prompts. There's always evidence or particular examples or details. They're almost always the last two bullet points. Pocatello's new flag better represents the city's mountainous geography and civic priorities. That's an effect. It represents the geography and the civic priorities. Residents consider the new flag to be a meaningful symbol of civic pride. That's the other effect of a city flag. So a city flag reflects the geography and civic priorities and helps inspire civic pride, or as a symbol of civic pride. So that's the effect of redesigning a city flag. Okay, so let's go through the answers. Over 100 cities have redesigned their flags, including Pocatello, whose flag has been named the most poorly designed flag. Okay, that's a specific detail. That is not a generalization. So what is a generalization? Generalization is going to be a broad summary or abstraction of what those specific examples represent that I outlined in pink there. So irrespective of the details that it's Pocatello, more broadly, redesigning a flag represents the effect of inspiring civic pride and representing civic priorities. We want to make a generalization or an abstraction of what we learned or what the examples, the specific examples, show. Okay? That's what we're looking for in the answer choice as a generalization. So A does not achieve that goal. Pocatello is just one of 100 cities that have redesigned their flags. This is a specific detail. It is not a generalization. So wrong answer choices are going to fall into two broad categories. It's not a generalization. It's the specific details, examples of typically one of the specific details or the others. Or it's a generalization, but not the generalization you want from the identified goal in the question prompt. Okay? Those are the typical wrong answer choices we're going to find. C, after it was named the most poorly designed flag in North America, the flag of Pocatello was redesigned to better represent the city's geography and civic priorities. Okay, again, after it was named the most poorly designed flag, that's what happened. The flag of Pocatello was redesigned. That's literally what happened. It is not a generalization. We want to generalize beyond just Pocatello. The correct answer is going to be that abstraction, the idea that the examples show, and then it's going to point out also that Pocatello was one example of that generalization. Let's look at D. Redesigning a poorly designed city flag can create a meaningful symbol of civic pride. Okay, this is about a city flag in general, not Pocatello. It can create a meaningful symbol of civic pride, as was the case when Pocatello redesigned its original flag to better represent its geography and civic priorities. That's exactly right. The effects of a city flag redesign are geography and civic priorities, as indicated above, and creating in general a symbol of civic pride. And the example shown of that generalization was the case of Pocatello. D is a correct answer, and that's the structure of correct answers we're going to be looking for generalization prompts. Let's review a slightly more challenging example of the generalization prompt. A student wants to make and support a generalization. So here we have the prompt among the rhetorical synthesis question type about, let's define what they want the generalization of first, about the orbits of the comets. Keep that identified generalization goal specifically in mind. Let's read the actual bullet points. Astronomers estimate the number of comets orbiting the sun is in the billions. 81P Wild is one of the many comets whose orbit has changed over time. 81P Wild's orbit once lay between the orbits of Uranus and Jupiter. The comet's orbit is now positioned between the orbits of Jupiter and Mars. Okay, so we have the two examples, are my last two bullet points that I want to draw a generalization on. Basically, this particular comet had one orbit and then it changed position to a different orbit. So orbits change, and this broad statement of that up above in green right before it in the bullet point, the orbits change over time. So that's what we learn generally about the prompt or the goal of the generalization. What do we want to know about the orbits of the comets? They've changed over time, as denoted by the examples given. So that's what I want to find in the answer. A, astronomers estimate that the number of comets orbiting the sun is in the billions. The comet's orbits may change over time. So it's true, the comet's orbits may change over time. That is a correct generalization. However, the generalization that the number of comets orbiting the sun is in the billions, that is not the focus of my defined generalization. That is a particular detail given in the background. So that is not going to be the right answer. Remember, wrong answers will be too specific details, not generalizations, or they'll be generalizations about the wrong thing. Let's look at B. Like Uranus, Jupiter, and Mars, billions of comets orbit the sun. Okay, that's a generalization that all of these celestial bodies orbit the sun. It is not the generalization we want for our defined goal in this problem. We want a generalization about the orbits of the comets. We don't care about the similarity of all the planets and comets that they orbit the sun. Okay, let's check C. One example of a comet is 81P Wild, whose orbit around the sun once lay between Uranus's and Jupiter's orbits, but its position now changed between those of Jupiter and Mars. Okay, this is the examples. This is what happened. It is not a generalization. So again, it's meeting one of our typical wrong answer choices. D, a comet's orbit around the sun may change over time. Yes, that is the generalization. That part is good. It's not specifically talking about 81P Wild, but in general, a comet's orbit may change over time. That was our defined goal. 81P Wild once lay between the orbits of Uranus and Jupiter, but now it's positioned between those in Jupiter and Mars. So the second part is, this is the example of the generalization stated in the answer choice, and that's always in there as well. D is the correct answer, again, in the same format of the correct answer for this generalization problem. Okay, let's look at a harder example still. Student wants to make a generalization about the Alta conflict. That's the generalization we want. Let's read the bullet points now. In 1978, Sami activists staged protests to block the construction of a dam on the Alta River in Norway. The dam would disrupt Sami fishing and reindeer herding. This is the background bullet points. The dam was ultimately built, but the Alta conflict had a lasting impact. It brought international attention to the issue of Sami's rights. It led to a set of 2005 legal protections establishing Sami rights to lands, waters, and resources. So the generalization here would, I guess, be the consequences that the next things that happened after the conflict was international attention was brought to the issue of Sami rights, and legal protections were established for Sami rights to lands, water, and resources. Okay, let's look at the answer choices. A, during the Alta conflict, Sami activists staged protests to block the construction of the dam at the Alta River. No, that was part of the actual background material, what happened. These are specifics. They're not going to be a correct or at all a generalization. Okay. B, although the dam that the Sami activists had protested was ultimately built, the Alta conflict had a lasting impact. Okay, this is a generalization, so it's a potentially compelling answer. although the dam that the Sami activists had protested was ultimately built. Well, unfortunately, this is a detail or a fact or a specific of what happened. So this is going to be problematic, probably, okay? I'm not going to cross this out yet because this is a correct generalization. So let's just hold on to this answer and move to the next. Sami rights to lands, waters, and resources received international attention and legal protections as a result of the Alta conflict. Well, yeah, they received attention and legal protections for the land, water, and resources. Sami rights to lands. Okay, this is specific. That's not actually a generalization. Sami rights to lands. It seems specific. Let's go on to D. The Alta conflict had a lasting impact. Okay, that seems to be a generalization, resulting in international attention, legal protections for Sami rights to lands, water, and resources. Okay, this seems to be the better structure, D. Generalization about the Alta conflict is that it had a lasting impact. Note D is exactly the same answer as C. It's essentially word for word. If I just change the ordering of the sentence of D, it would basically say the same thing. Sami rights to lands, water, and resources received international attention, and legal protections resulted as a result of the Alta conflict. The only difference between C and D is literally the statement that it had a lasting impact. That makes this a really tricky problem. Hard to differentiate C versus D. But notice the following. The bullet point statement, the generalization, is almost always right before the two bullet point examples, at the end of that bullet point. This seems to be a pattern, and that is the generalization we want. So the generalization we should get from the Alta conflict is that last statement before the bullet points, and then it should say that in the answer, and then give the examples, a summary of those two bullet points as one particular example or particular examples of that generalization. The Alta conflict had a lasting impact. Now, that's not an obvious generalization like some of the other problems, so this is pretty difficult. Only real way to kind of get that idea is to understand how these questions are structured, where to find that generalization that meets your goal, and understand where to find the examples that support that are. It seems to always be in that structure. So difficult question, but if you note that structure and it seems to be repeating, you could get a hard problem like this correct.